Alex, the good news is the Museum of Bath Architecture is going to open again, but there must have been a reason why you closed it. So what's changed?
Well, truth be told, when it got to the end of 2019, we would usually have closed the museum at the end of December. I think we reopened it for a week or two, and then of course COVID-19 hit, so we had to make the decision, obviously, to close all of our museums. Bath Preservation Trust is 100% dependent upon visitor income and as well as our memberships. And so when the museums closed overnight, we lost all of our income, basically. Obviously, we're now three and a half years beyond that point, and we opened number 1 Royal Crescent and Herschel's Museum of Astronomy. But it was felt that this chapel, as wonderful as it is, it wasn't viable to keep it open any longer. And we've been thinking about what we might like to do for it so that it continues to be a museum that's important to Bath and that we can reopen it. But you can feel it's cold and drafty and damp, and it costs a fortune to keep open with energy costs and everything else.
So what's changed? Why are you reopening it now?
Well, we know we want to do something. This museum tells an amazing story about the building of Bath from the Georgian era, but also it tells a story of the sack of Bath. Much of the collection was salvaged from the rubble during the sack of Bath between 68 and 73. But we also want to tell the story about what's the next version of historic buildings in Bath. How do we retrofit them? How do we make them fit for the future? So we want to reopen the museum, but we know that we need a major capital injection to make this building warmer, environmentally friendly. So we're reopening for this year so that we can engage with visitors. I know it's a really popular museum. Lots of people have contacted me to say they're pleased it's reopening, but we want to engage them with what the next story for this museum is.
So do you want them to make suggestions as to what you should do here?
Museums are about people, and it would be daft of us to miss the trick of talking to the people who will value this museum in its new format. So yes, we want as many people to offer their opinions, their views about what's the displays they would like to see, what's the temporary exhibitions that we should be running, how should we sensitively and carefully treat the interior so that it still feels like the Countess of Huntingdon's chapel, but it also feels like a new and exciting museum that they want to come to.
Well, you guys obviously have some idea of how you would like to reimagine this museum. How dependent are you on money? I mean, are you furiously scribbling away preparing an HLF application?
We are naturally looking to grant funders to help support what we would like to do with the chapel. And we're at the beginning of that process at the moment. So a meeting with the National Lottery Heritage Fund is on the cards. But we're also we want to be creative about how we redesign this museum as well. So more of that to come later. What we know we would like to do, though, is we want to do something to make it warmer. We want to retrofit it. And we know that, having spoken with Bureau Happold, that retrofit is a real option here, as is a more sustainable energy source.
What exactly does retrofit mean?
Well, retrofit, the ground we're on is a beautiful flagstone floor. Underneath this flagstone floor, we think, is a medieval cemetery. And so we have taken the decision we're not going to lift the flagstones because the archaeology would be such an expensive thing to deal with. But we are considering whether a suspended floor means that we can stop. I mean, this works as a cold radiator, but a suspended floor, wooden floor, would mean that we can insulate and put underfloor heating in. We have 19 wonderful windows here, which we can secondary glaze, certainly, to make them more thermally efficient. And believe it or not, the roof space has not got a shred of insulation in it. Because it's a really fragile traditional roof from 1765. So there are lots of options and lots of opportunity for the chapel, but we want to be talking to people in the first instance so that they are involved with the story of how it changes.
Looking around Bath, I'm just wondering what there is of today to actually add in terms of architecture. I mean, it's a bit easier when you point at Georgian buildings, but I don't know how you feel about that.
There's, it's something. We have had some really interesting architecture and also some quite variable architecture. I think that I would point to the high points, or those high points which I would think are really interesting, like the former Herman Miller factory, which I think is a really interesting building, which has been redeveloped, reimagined to then become the School of Arts and Design for Bath Spa University. Of course, the Holborn Museum, with its beautiful, I think it's a beautiful extension. And those are some of the high points, but also, as well as the Georgian heart, we have these wonderful characteristic Victorian terraces that surround the area, and many other buildings as well. There are some ones that I would not choose to mention.